Joining us right now to get us started with a look back on an incredibly busy and jam-packed week, longest week of the year, in my opinion, is Fox News national security strategist and New York Times bestselling author Defeating Jihad. He is Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, good to talk to you, my friend.
Greetings, Larry.
Thank you for joining us. What a week is it me or has this not been the longest week? It's weird to me that it was only 4 days ago we were all talking about Sarah Huckabee Sanders being thrown out of a restaurant.
No, it is definitely not you. Every week, every day you think the next day may be a slightly more normal news cycle. Every week you expect to get a little respite the following week. But no, whether it's the insanity of Maxine Waters, whether it's the incredibly important SCOTUS decisions coming down, this is, I think you're right, this could be, one of the longest weeks since the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States.
Well, let's start sort of in your wheelhouse, and that is the announcement of a summit between Vladimir Putin and President Donald Trump. What are we hoping to gain from this conversation with Russia?
Well, I think the president, as with all meetings of this nature, walks into them with his eyes wide open, and he doesn't want to create problems where there aren't problems, but he's a pragmatist, and he understands that there's a very small amount of common interest that we have with the former KGB Colonel Vladimir Putin. He knows that he's a disruptor. He doesn't want to kick a hornet's nest. He said from the very beginning that he's not looking to make new enemies, but if there is somewhere that we can cooperate, for example, two specific things come to mind. That's counterterrorism against the jihadi menace writ large, and secondly, with regards to Syria, I think those are the most concrete things they'll be discussing. And I think in exchange, Vladimir Putin is interested in one thing. He's obsessed with some kind of recognition for that golden photo opportunity with the most powerful man in the world. So we'll see what the president gets out of it, but there'll be no concessions made, just as there were no concessions made of any true strategic import when he went to Singapore.
Is it still American policy that Russia has no business being in the Crimean Peninsula? And how will President Trump address that issue with President Putin?
Yeah, no, it is absolutely. If you listen to Nikki Haley, if you listen to the Senior Director for Europe at the National Security Council or to the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, that has been the line from the very beginning. The Russian Federation broke a 65-year-old taboo. Since World War II, we do not recognize other nations taking the territory of other countries and keeping it, and Russia broke that taboo. How Donald Trump is going to address it, I think that's going to be a discussion that's going to happen behind closed doors, very frank language, maybe just the two heads of state and the two interpreters, as was the case of the first discussions with Kim in Singapore. And I think there's going to have to be some recognition that the president has revitalized NATO. He's got a commitment of 2% GDP spending from all the NATO nations, and we're strengthening our friends in the Baltics and in Poland. So he's going to send a very clear message that this is wrong and it will not be allowed to stand. He's not going to provoke a war, but he's going to be very clear that the theft of Crimea is wrong.
And what about the tangled, complicated region of Syria and spilling over into the Kurdish territories and Turkey? Russia is all over that area, and we have natural allies there. We have natural enemies there. And then, of course, I have no idea on a day-to-day basis where Turkey stands with us. What's that conversation like, or is that even in the top 5 issues that will come up?
Syria, absolutely. Russia has been a player with its forces on the ground, but it's not been a constructive one. Remember, we, the U.S., have killed hundreds of Russian mercenaries because of the actions they've taken to support the Assad regime. The president understands, I think, instinctually, and this is what I always say about Russia, this is not like every other country. This isn't Belgium. This isn't Canada. Most countries like the status quo. Russia, like Iran, like Venezuela, like other problem nations, is an anti-status quo actor. They try to sow confusion. They dabble, they destabilize until they can profit from it. I think the president's going to send a clear message that your behavior in that region has to be constructive if you are there at all.
Well, and given that Russia is such a disruptor, of course, the media will be focusing almost monolithically on the question of Russian meddling in the 2016 election, their hacking activities, their cyber activities. The president is going to have some sort of public statement or public address on that, won't he?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think given the sheer insanity of the media coverage of this administration for the last year and a half, I think they'll be, salivating for any signal they can misinterpret to say that, look, he's a friend of Vladimir Putin. But if we just take politics out of the equation, and it doesn't matter who you voted for. I don't care if you wanted Bernie Sanders to become president. If you look at every concrete thing the president has done since inauguration, whether it's arming the Ukrainians, whether it's unleashing oil production in the Anwar, whether it's revitalizing NATO, none of them have been good for Vladimir. I'm sure there will be some statement, some boilerplate statement about meddling in our elections, but it won't be the main focus of the summit.
Let's turn now to some of those Supreme Court decisions that came down this week, and we'll begin with the travel ban, Dr. Gorka, because this directly affects, obviously, our national security. Do you expect, and is this ban now implemented? Has it been put into place now that the Supreme Court has overturned the injunction, or is there another step in this process?
No, this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is it. This is exactly what we said. I mean, I was on the front lines of this issue the week after the inauguration when the travel moratorium dropped. And what we argued back then, what I argued, what Stephen Miller, what everybody else argued, has not changed. In the 1950s and the 1980s, and now at the level of the Supreme Court, the president's unique authority to decide upon what standards people are measured when they come into this country, and his unique authority laid down by law to have a moratorium on aliens from any nation is his and his alone. We've wasted months and months. We've wasted millions and millions. This moratorium is now in full effect, Larry.
And is there any, I was taken by some of the members of the military who had served in Iraq and had said, obviously there are some great Iraqis there who helped our soldiers out, helped our Marines out. And I was taken by their arguments saying, oh, you're telling me the guy who was my translator and helped me do my job when I was in town, he's not welcome in America? I mean, does this make it harder in some cases for our military who are still serving there in Afghanistan to do their job?
I think that's a little bit of an emotional argument. Let me tell you a fascinating story that I experienced. This was about a month after the moratorium was signed by the president. I was on Capitol Hill, and I was walking down, I think it was the Hart building, and I had an individual come up to me, thick Middle Eastern accent, clearly an immigrant, and he said to me, he recognized that, Dr. Gorka, I'm from Iraq. I want to tell you what my friends back in Iraq are saying. They are waiting to come here. They are good guys, but they completely agree with the president because there are too many bad guys who are trying to come to America. We will wait. We will be cleared, we will come, but you can't let the bad guys come to Iraq. So when an Iraqi national tells me that his friends back home understand why this needs to be done, I understand the emotional ties to your interpreters and everything else, but let's listen to Iraqi nationals who understand the threat to the country they want to come and live in.
We're speaking with Sebastian Gorka in his new book, Why We Fight, Recovering America's Will to Win. It is available now. It's not out yet, but you can pre-order it, apparently, and you should do that. It's going to be out in September. Looking forward to talking to you about the book and reading the book, Dr. Gorka. By the way, are you going to be doing the audiobook on that? Or
I told my publisher, I told Regnery that you're not getting the manuscript unless I get to do the full audiobook this time. And I'm happy to report that the great Margie Ross has said yes. So
all right.
I'm going to the Audible Studios, and it will be my dulcet tones you will hear on the audiobook.
I think it would have been hilarious if you'd gotten somebody with like a really high squeaky voice to do it, saying all of your words. Doctor, let's take a bigger picture on the Supreme Court. I've been watching you on social media, and I know how pumped up you were. First of all, just looking back at the first year with Neil Gorsuch firmly in place as President Trump's first nominee to the Supreme Court, and then the news that Justice Kennedy is stepping down. You know, from the Andrew Breitbart perspective, if all the right people are angry and hysterical, then it's got to be a good thing. And boy, they are angry and hysterical, Gorka.
Yeah, this is the metric that I had in the White House, and it stands today. If the Washington Post and CNN are angry at you, guess what?
Yeah.
You are doing the Lord's work, and every Trump voter is happy. My motto was, if CNN, the Washington Post, New York Times, HuffPo ever says anything nice about me, every Trump voter should ask for their money back. So the people who are pulling their hair out right now are all the right people you want pulling their hair out.
Yeah, and what do you think the process is right now in the White House? And the president has to be happy with the way Justice Gorsuch has performed.
Yes.
Should we expect a carbon copy of Gorsuch in this Kennedy seat?
Yeah, this is so tough because Kennedy was a massive disappointment, and so we have this real issue of can we find somebody who will maintain that attitude of constitutionality, that it's a document as written, that it's an eternal document, and won't be swayed by the political correctness a decade or a generation later. I have to look. You know why I'm optimistic? Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society that have done amazing work in getting the right people onto the federal bench since the inauguration. I know they're going to be part of the group that is advising the president, and I trust Leonard, and they've done such an amazing job so far that odds on that they'll choose the right person, the right man or woman. I
got to tell you, there's going to be so much written for decades to come, past our lifetimes, Dr. Gorka, about the 2016 election. But I think there could be a volume written just about the brilliant political maneuver of offering that list of judges by President Trump, by candidate Trump at the time. Can you stay with us a little while longer? I do want to talk to you about what happened with Sarah Huckabee Sanders and other cabinet officials, because if this president can't attract great people to work for his administration, then we got problems. And I worry about that based on what we saw here. So we're going to stay with Dr. Sebastian Gorka a little while longer.
You're listening to The Larry O'Connor Show.
We've seen some pretty awful activity toward members of the president's staff, his administration, his cabinet, even people who just have upper-level positions at ICE. The left is unhinged, and I wonder if this is going to keep good people from taking the important jobs that this president needs them to do. We continue with Dr. Sebastian Gorka. You were one of those men, Dr. Gorka. No one's going to mess with you. You're a big, strapping guy. But, I got to tell you, if my wife were tapped to work for the administration, I would have grave concern. If I'm Matt Schlapp right now, I worry about Mercedes going to work every day.
Larry, it's not just about me. I mean, they attacked me in the press. They attacked my wife. They attacked my dead mother's reputation. They attacked my teenage son. I mean, this is the world we live in. These people call themselves journalists. And it's not just the issue. I know, it's a fair question. Can you get good people to work in the administration? There's a deeper issue. Let's think about just what happened this week. I don't know who Donny Deutsch is, but he's a guest on a national TV show. Both he and then a person who was stunningly a Republican congressman called Joe Scarborough both use the same concept, and words have consequences. Both of these men on national programs said, if you voted for Donald Trump, you don't have to be his press secretary. If you just voted for him, you are a Nazi. You are like a stormtrooper at a death camp choosing who lives and who dies. That's what Donny Deutsch said. That's what Joe Scarborough said. That is based upon the concept. That argument is based upon the concept of collective guilt. Now, the massive irony here is which organization used the concept of collective guilt to build their empire?
As the Nazis.
And it was Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, that's the Third Reich there.
When he attacked the Jews, the homosexuals, the Catholics, and he said, you are all collectively guilty for what happened to Germany in World War I.
Yep.
That led to the gas chambers. That led to the Holocaust. And now Democrats are using the same argument against people who voted for Donald Trump.
So, I started the week with this conversation. What does this lead to? I mean, Charlie Hurt just wrote about the same ideas that I had this week, which is that we are in the middle of a cold civil war, and it's getting warmer and warmer. Is there a way to where's the leadership on this? And does the president have a role? Listen, I support the president, but does he have a role in sort of addressing this and saying, hey, let's all take a pause here?
Yeah, I think he can play a role, and I think he could do something very symbolic to point out the levels and the depths of the Trump derangement syndrome and try and reach out to these people. But at the end of the day, remember, it's not the right that has normalized violence. There's no equivalent of Antifa on the right. When you go to a Trump rally, you will never see anybody wearing a mask, carrying bags of urine, carrying baseball bats. The left has to take responsibility for their own extremists, and they have to tamp this down before people get killed.
I completely agree. I do. We saw what happened at the baseball diamond with Representative Smith. I agree. Dr. Gorka, I got to leave it there. Sadly, we're up against it. When I asked the president for leadership, I'm certainly not suggesting that we're responsible. I'm just saying, I want to hear from him about everything. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, thanks for joining us, and enjoy your Independence Day.